So, namaste, everyone. For those who have come to this conference for the first time, I would like to introduce Dr. Alok Pandey once again. He has already given his keynote talk, and on popular demand, he has given us the time for question and answer session. So, I'll just introduce him for a few minutes, and then he will start his session. So, Dr. Alok Pandey is a psychiatrist, philosopher, researcher, and lecturer in integral education based on the philosophy of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. He had several encounters with death during his medical practice. A philosopher of temperament, he raised many questions and sought answers to them, both internally and externally. He was finally only by it was finally only by coming into contact with Sri Aurobindo and the Mother that he found the answers that quenched the thirst of his soul. He is currently associated with the Sri Aurobindo International Institute for Integral Health and Research in Pondicherry, an institute dedicated to Sri Aurobindo's work and vision in the field of health. He has been the education editor-in-chief of Nama, a journal dedicated to the cause of an integral approach to psychology, health, and medicine, since its inception in 1993. Author of books such as Death, Dying, and Beyond, Patients at the Crossroads, and Veda of the Body. His articles have been published in various reputable journals. An eloquent speaker, he has conducted workshops in India and abroad in yoga, education, health, and psychology. So this is going to be a follow-up session of his keynote. So let's welcome Alokji with a lot of claps and joy. Thank you.
So, as we know, this is a follow-up session on question answers, and I already have a few questions with me, and I'll start with them, and subsequently, depending on the time and questions, we can take it further. So, the first question, two very interesting questions. First is, for expectant mothers, what should be the routine for an expectant mother? I am happy, bit surprised also, because normally, why every time we hear the routine for an expectant mother, as if fathers don't have much role to play. But the child is as much a father's, conception as it is the mother's. But nevertheless, it is true that since mothers are forming the child within their own body, the role of a mother is enormous. Now, the word conception implies two things. If we really use the word, it's very interesting. One is the physical conception. That part we know about that. But conception is a term also used to mean psychological conception. What is it that, how do we conceive? So, it's very important when we conceive or go in for a child to understand why we are having a child. What is our conception of child? What is a child going to be brought into this world for? Is it simply to satisfy my needs, desires, buy me, get me things which I could not succeed in doing, fulfilling my ambitions? Such a parenting is definitely far from the ideal that we conceive in terms of the new consciousness and the new humanity of the future. What we really want is that there is, Mother in one of her early talks speaks of the new conception. Now, what is this new conception? One, the old way is that there is the old humanity. And in this old humanity, there is old way of life, old way of looking at things. So, basically, there is the old humanity and there is the old way of life in which we have old ideals, but all within the human frame. Now, the new conceptions for which motherhood is important, that's how the mother puts it, is that there is a new kind of humanity or a new kind of possibility in which human beings are going to exceed and go beyond what they are, what their frame is within that frame. So, this new conception the mother calls as the Superman, and she says something very interesting, that Superman will be born of the womb of a woman. So, women are going to have this exceptional privilege of bringing into birth the Superman. It is something very unprecedented. She brings a completely new aspiration that a woman can become participant to a new creation. Just as the new creation is leaping from the heart of the Divine Mother, so also physically women who are conceiving children now, they can bring in to birth the Superman. So we must understand now what is this superhumanity. Every mother wants that my child should be the best, the highest, the greatest. But the best and the highest and the greatest within the human limits, we need to understand is nothing compared to the greatest and the best and the highest that is yet going to come. So basically, two, three things which we must remember, that all our human achievements at every level will fail and pale away in front of what is going to come. This is what Sri Aurobindo and the mother has envisaged. But still we must have some understanding. What will be that being? What kind of being? Is it something with new capacities, new powers, new possibilities? Well, one way of looking at it is like that. But most importantly, the new being, the new consciousness which will come, will act by intuition. So none of the goals and aims that we put forth before children from the time they are born are not going to apply. Children will discover by an inner intuition what they are meant to be. To exceed the human frame, to exceed the human formula, this will be his preoccupation. Which means, if we really want to put it in very practical terms, it will be endless progress and a march towards perfection. Which means that when we are bringing a child into this world, we should be aspiring that, O Divine, O Lord, whichever way we want to conceive, let this child be constantly moving towards an endless stream of progression and perfection. What we do instead is fix a goal. Now, the moment we fix a goal, we limit the possibilities. The goal could be becoming a doctor, the goal could be even becoming a good human being. Now, we have fixed the limit. Now, don't fix the ceiling limit for a child. There should be a constant urge towards going further and further, exceeding the limits, going into greater and greater beyond. This is important to understand. Second thing which he says, that all we try to, stuff a child with all kinds of formulas of life. Now we must understand that there is a greater truth that we do not yet know or do not yet understand. So in a child, the child should carry within himself or herself the thirst for truth and the urge towards perfection, the urge for light, the seeking for light. Now, this seeking and thirst is born in a child when parents carry this thirst. If we really look at us ourselves carefully, one of the big challenges of parenting, as somebody asked also, parents, one of the big problems that we have today is that we all believe that we know. We read a few books, we have, heard a few talks, and we believe that we know. So that thirst, that seeking, that tends to go into the background. So when a mother awakens within herself this endless thirst, by thirst is meant, I want to know more, I want to seek more. It's not enough that I have read all about, God or divine, but I want to actually realize. Now, the moment this aspiration awakens, naturally it gets contaminated into the child. So what are the practical ways of doing it? Someone has very rightly and beautifully suggested that I read Savitri and I read prayers and meditations. Now what is the, how does it help? One is, of course, the straight answer is that when we read Savitri, when we read prayers and meditations, they contain those vibrations, that spiritual consciousness, and it enters into us, and it's like a food for the child's soul. But there is another dimension to it, which is how we should read Savitri and prayers and meditation. When we read these books, we discover that infinite possibilities are there before us as human beings. And it impels us, compels us, helps us to seek them. Because when we read Savitri, just read one canto. Book 1, canto 2. What the Divine Mother embodies, what kind of love is there inside her. How she is leading her life, her mind, which is a sea of white sincerity. She is governed, her movements are governed by truth's revealing vault. And just reading that passage, wonderful passage, her kindly care was a sweet and temperate sun. Then we feel, oh my God, we are so far away from this. We just read that one canto and we'll see what is the difference between Savitri and ordinary humanity. That while ordinary humanity is lured by the beauty of the apparent ways, and they wake up and go to receive their daily share of joy. So every day we live life ki aaj something must happen in my life which should make me happy. But she is not lured by that, because she has come as a mission child. She has to find something greater, something deeper, something more beautiful than that has ever happened. So when we really read that passage, we should begin to feel that, my God, this is so beautiful. How I wish I could be like that. This is the whole purpose. Savitri is the story of the Divine Mother. It inspires us to become like her, to become one with her. That was the whole purpose of Ramayana, or the stories of Krishna. That when we read, we really feel that one is we worship, yes, but more importantly, that can we embody some of these qualities. Similarly, when we read book 1, canto 3, we see what kind of experiences that Ashwapati has. He is able to receive, his senses are open to a new world, as if there is a new perception, new kind of knowledge can pour from inside. And then when this aspirations awakens within us like a fire, then automatically a child who is within the womb will catch that fire. So reading is all right. Similarly, prayer and meditation, we can do a mechanical reading, and of course it will help. But read to awaken the aspiration. When we read with an aspiration, conscious aspiration, then automatically it will come into the child. This is the main thing. And in the daily routine, few things which are important is talk to the child. It is something which is missing. The child is becoming conscious. You see, a 3-month-old child, it is said that somewhere or the other, it's not that the soul does come and enter, that will take place much later, but it starts visiting the atmosphere of the parents. Now, it's not that soul will enter right away, but from 3 months onward, especially 5 months, when the heart begins to beat, life has entered. The soul comes and makes visitations. Just like, when you want to buy a plot, you go and see different plots and decide, okay, this is a good plot, and you come. So, it's not what we are doing, but in general, what is our state of consciousness, what is our atmosphere. So when a soul which is of a very high quality wants to enter, what kind of place it would want to come? It will want to come into a home where the atmosphere is full of peace and harmony and joy, because then it can develop in that atmosphere. So all around us, we must try to create an atmosphere of beauty and harmony and joy, which means the way we arrange the room, the decor of the room, from smallest thing, the way we interact with each other. Mind you, they say that the child is watching us, when the child is born, something of the child is watching us even before it is born. It comes into the atmosphere, comes into contact and sees what kind of people. Now, supposing we are quarreling all day, but apparently we sit for half an hour and read something, Ramayana or, Savitri or something. But the soul knows it from a different angle. He says, my God, what kind of parent? So a good soul goes away. But some other soul says, okay, fine, querulous couple, excellent parentage, that's what I want. Angry parents. So that kind of soul gets drawn into the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is far more important. Environment, inner and outer, is far more important than the activities we are doing. So try to cultivate conscious peace, harmony, and that's where the role of father comes in, because he has a lot of role to play in creating the environment and atmosphere of the home. This is the second aspect. Third is that we can actually, by our thoughts, form the child. The mother speaks of it. So we watch over our thoughts. Now, a simple way to watch over the thoughts is that all around inside the room, put some nice, beautiful things. It's a very simple way, practical way. So that going, coming, your eyes are falling onto that. You must have seen inside the ashram, those of us who have come near the samadhi, you will see a little board written in mother's handwriting, silence. Now, the moment you come there, it touches you. Silence. Now, of course, people sometimes tell you also, but seeing is enough. So, inside the room, strategic places, not places where you will not see, but strategic places. One, right in the bedroom. When you look up, when you are seeing, your gaze will fall naturally at a place. Don't try to make it unnatural, that there is mother's picture on the side. Yes, by all means, you do it. But there are places where our gaze naturally falls. So, try to keep some very beautiful things there where your gaze naturally falls. Even in bathroom, when we are sitting, there is a natural point. Put a little writing in front. So while going, coming, this writing is entering into us, entering into the subconscious part. This is the sanskaras. Very often people ask that what sanskara should we do? This is the sanskara. That all the time, all this is entering into us from every side. All these strategic spots, place something beautiful, maybe a rose, maybe a plant. So this is another dimension of this. Fourth, as I said, importantly, talk to the child. So, talk to the child, tell a beautiful story. This story of Astavakra learning the Gita, or Abhimanyu learning the, Chakravyuh. So, speak to the child. Maybe, and it's very conscious. We may think that child, oh, he is not yet born. This is the typical medical paradigm of looking at a child. But a child, in terms of soul, has his own understanding. So when you're talking, many expectant mothers often, get into a relation with the child. Even they, put their hand over the abdomen and say certain words. Music, it is known that when you play music in the child's environment, the child listens, receives. So talk to the child beautiful things, chant a mantra, but don't chant a mantra impersonally, chant a mantra, to the child. So slowly we will see that the child will develop those faculties spontaneously, like love for music, fascination for a certain mantra. Mother's music, if you play in the environment, I have seen this actually happen. And reading something from the mother, telling the child beautiful things when the baby is in the womb. So when we do all these things, create an atmosphere, talk to the child, have a conscious aspiration. When we read Savitri and prayers and meditation, awaken this fire inside us, the thirst for light, love for truth, then spontaneously we will see that the child will embody some of these things. At the same time, we must know that each child will bring his own destiny. And that we have to allow for that. This is only for the conception. When the child is born, the same process becomes a lot more active. But except that, we must understand that trying to mold a child into a fixed format, even a spiritual format, please don't do that. Children have to discover their own spiritual impulsion. Spiritual impulsion takes many shapes. I remember a child of 5, playing football inside one of the standard places, meditation halls. Football means taking a ball and doing this. So typically one of the elderly person scolded the child and said, "You don't play football here in the meditation room. Don't you know?" and scolded. So the child looked at this person, elderly person, and said, "You know what? I'm showing my football to the mother. And why are you scolding me in the presence of the mother?" Now, when I heard this, it happened in front of me, and I said, this child is more conscious than. So, while I understand there is a place and we must understand that place, but to a child, never scold, never. Few things mother has said, never scold, never lose your temper. Immediately, if we lose our temper and show any kind of, it's a sign of weakness. Strong people are always quiet, peaceful. Losing temper means a very weak vital. The moment you lose temper, you have lost the game. The child will never respect. Whatever outwardly may say, he'll say, "Oh, this fellow is not worth emulating." So we must be a living example. And then mother says, when a child comes and spontaneously accepts a mistake, then immediately he should be, don't punish a child, never. The moment he comes and accepts a mistake, make him conscious. All life is about becoming conscious. So we must discuss with the child and make him conscious that what could be the repercussions of a certain action, certain line of thought. That's how it's a constant growth. So talk to the child in that terms. And most importantly, she says, never bring fear between you and the child. Why? Because fear is the most pernicious thing, most dangerous thing. What happens when we bring fear? Then children become very underconfident to start with. This fear that we have injected will not remain only with parents. It will go and spread into the whole world. This child, wherever he goes or she goes, she'll be afraid. Why? Because she doesn't have trust. She believes that I'm making mistakes, I'm wrong. Even when she is doing things which are right, she will start with this idea, I am doing wrong. Because we have instilled from childhood this idea that you are doing wrong constantly, and this fear has come in. So fear is very, is the worst kind of impurity. The second thing that happens with fear is that children begin to develop hypocrisy. So in front of, they learn that, if I am like this, I will get a scolding. So what they do is they start presenting a very nice face. So many teachers are also carried away. Oh, dekho, kitna shant bachcha hai, kitna acha bachcha hai. Because they have learned that if I do this, I will get praise from the teachers. So we must be very careful when we give praises as to why we are praising. And we must discover that each child comes with his own unique things. Now, that's a long subject and I'm not going into it. But basically, replace fear with trust. And most importantly, give them a drop of truth mixed with abundant love. If we can do that to a child, nothing else is needed. They need every day, along with the breast milk that children feed, give them enough love. Love never spoils anyone. It is indulgence, wrong attachment, false understanding, giving child anything that he asks out of God knows what, proving that we are very good parents, that can spoil a child. Love never spoils a child. So give them abundant love, express it through hands, because the first contact that children understand is hands, touch. Touch is earth. So when they are born, from that moment onwards, right till old age, have you seen that when parents, they used to come and when you are not well, what do parents do? They touch the forehead. And old time doctors used to do this. When you go and say ki, uncle, I am not well, so doctors will touch, hold, say, beta theek ho jayega. Now doctors are wearing masks from a distance with a thermometer. So even if you don't have much problem, you will end up with a problem. Okay, so give them contact. There is a word called contact comfort. Give them touch, embrace them. Don't be, oh, how can I hold the hand of a child? How can I embrace? Embrace, play with the child. This is the means. When we embrace a child, when we hold the hand, we are connecting the petrol pump with the scooter. Okay, and the petrol pump is the heart where we have love. And the child's body and being is the vehicle. But how do we transfer it? We can do it with gaze, we can do it through words, but it comes most easily with contact. So touch, please use touch in education. From birth to death, touch is a wonderful thing. Learn to cultivate the joy and beauty of touch. So these are just some of the thoughts, and I'll take up the next question now. Okay? Which is also very interesting. There are two more interesting questions. So the second question is, where does love come from? And I have a very simple answer to this. Love comes from the heart of God. You see, when we read the Purush Sukta in the Rig Veda, it describes God in the form of a human being. Now somebody will say that, well, God is made in the image of man. No, man is made in the image of God. So the core, where is this heart located? See, whenever we say namaste, we do it here. Or we say me. Have you ever seen people touching here and say me? If somebody touches here, you say he's going crazy, no? Supposing you meet somebody says I. So you will say, are you angry? Or somebody touches the stomach and says me. So you will think he is hungry. But when you say me, or when you bow down, isn't it? This is how we do it, isn't it? Very naturally. Because this is the center, this is the core. Love is the core of God. It comes from the deepest self of God. It comes from the inmost. And therefore, we can almost say that when you have gone through all experiences of divine, impersonal, personal, Brahman, everything else, manifestation, divine in manifestation, Sharabhava, divine beyond manifestation, Akshar, everything you have gone through, beyond the manifest and non-manifest, beyond the being and the non-being, then you discover love. If you have discovered love, you have discovered everything else. So love comes from there. But what we experience as love is something very different. The Ganges source is the same, Gomukh, but by the time it comes to Haridwar, it is already getting spoiled. And Ganga Sagar means it's all mixed up with muddy water. So love needs very strong, very pure vehicles to embody it. Love will not stay for long if the patram is, very small, mixed with jealousies, possessiveness, hatred, lusts. I want to possess, dominate. Love will say, okay, fine. Please exhaust all your asuric propensities, then I will come. This is how Sri Aurobindo describes in Mahalakshmi. That she steps back. A divine disgust seizes her. And then when mother was asked that why is it that love comes to us like a wandering guest, it doesn't stay for a long time. This happens. People fall in love and fall out of love. And then they say love is bad. Then again they fall in love. Again they fall out of love. Again they say love is bad. And this goes. Rather they should say love is not bad. I don't know how to love. So how to love? She says that you must be very pure, very vast, very strong, because it's a tremendous energy. A weak person cannot love. Sentimentality is not love. Oh, if you don't do according to my this thing, I will do this or that. People emotionally blackmail. This is not love. This is bargain. This is business. Like, business people bargain. Love is something which knows only to give. The moment I want, I ask, I demand, I expect comes in, please understand it is not love. Love means the urge to give, and not because somebody asks you to give, because it is the urge to give. And it is one of the most beautiful feelings in this world. If you ask me of all the feelings, which is the most beautiful feeling, most ultimate, it is self-giving. And the reason is this, that when we give ourselves, we escape from the smallness and we enter into the vastness and infinity of God, and we experience delight. So, love comes from the heart of the divine. To embody it, we need to be very pure. Pure means here, freed from all these clutches of lower nature with all these, as I said, possessiveness, domination, expectation, jealousy, and all this. Then it's something else, anger, fear. And one has to be very strong to bear its impact, because, as I said, it's the most tremendous power. It's like a super Niagara, Maha-tsunami. And if one is not strong, one will be completely broken. So that's why love comes in our life like a wandering guest. So this is about love. I could go on for a week on this subject, but let me go to the next question, since it's a question answer session. Now this question is about new consciousness. What is the new consciousness in layman's terms? Very simple. What is old consciousness? Old consciousness is what we are. Okay, we all know what we are. We don't need to understand. What is new consciousness? New consciousness is the divine whom we adore. Look at it very simply. What do we understand when we speak about divine or God? We immediately understand somebody who is full of compassion, full of love, strength, somebody who has all the wisdom, practical omniscience, omnipotent, somebody who will never get angry on you, somebody who knows wisdom is embodied inside, somebody who will act according to the law of truth. So when we, in ancient olden times, when we used to worship, we all have a Varnan of divine. So who is the divine? Divine is the purest, highest of what? Of our own inmost self. So when we, even materially, as I said, you read the description of the Divine Mother in Book 1, Canto 2, and you'll see that this is what the new consciousness is, new being is. Several places we will read that. And in Sri Ramcharitmanas, we have a description of Lord Rama. Everybody must be aware of that. Sri Ramachandra Kripalu Bhajman Harana Bhav Bhe Darunam Nav Kanja Lochan Kanja Mukh Kar Kanja Pad Kanjarunam. All of us have heard, no? When we read Hanuman Chalisa, what do we read? We read description about divinity. We read about what a divine being should be. He should be strong, wise, ever ready to do the divine work, driven by the breath of God, full of love, full of strength. Now, all these attributes man has aspired for. If we want to put it technically little more in a secular way, then we'll say somebody who has truth without any possibility of error. Who is that? Divine. He can't make mistakes. You may think he's making mistake because we have a limited way of understanding. But he can't make mistake because he acts in perfect wisdom. Then similarly, bliss, which never fades away. Not the joy and sorrow we experience. Who is that blissful? The divine. Peace, which is always there. Unconditional peace. No agitation, worry, any of those things. Who is that? The divine. Complete absence of fear. Want to read those divine qualities? There in the Gita also. So, what really is the new consciousness? New consciousness is a divine humanity. In very layman terms, I'm not going into it. So, what is the divine humanity? All that man has worshipped through the ages, but worshipped. And why he has worshipped? Give me this, give me that. But now, the boon that Sri Aurobindo has asked for humanity is give me yourself. I want to become like you. Not only in my soul, that is old yoga, but also in my mind, in my thoughts. May I think the way you think. May I feel the way you feel. May all your sweetness and love and joy be embodied in my heart. May I act the way you act. May my will be impelled by your will. And may my very body become a transparent instrument, channel, radiant vessel, perfect, wide, and plastic vehicle for your truth, for your light, for your peace, your sweetness, and ananda to express through it. So, when this happens, then we will say there will be a divine superhumanity. All the divinity, all the divine qualities. Recently we had Durga Puja. So who is Durga? Durga is somebody who has embodied all the gods inside. All the great gods have come into her. Now when a lady embodies Durga's courage, Durga's wisdom, then what do we say? She is like Durga, isn't it? So, similarly, when human beings will embody the divine, whom we worship in a temple or wherever, when he will become one with the divine, not only inside, but in his mind, even in the outer nature, then this earth will become a home for the divine and the wonderful. So, basically, in one word, if you ask me, what is the new consciousness? New consciousness is the consciousness of the divine embodied by human beings through a process of evolutionary leap. It is the same thing. It is the divine superhumanity of the future. Then we can talk about what is the challenge. There are several challenges. We are built upon old format. Our old humanity is based on ego, driven by desire, lives by analytical reason. The senses are limited. The very body is limited. So all these have to change. So that is the process. So I'm not talking of the process. Transformation implies that all this old has to change into the new. So what is the simplest way? Well, we started with this premise that a new humanity is that we go to God and do not say, give me this, give me that. We say, give me yourself, sir, I want you. So what will God say? He will smile and say, yes, but there is only one condition. Only one. What is it, sir? Shall I give you 10,000 rupees as gift? No. A lot of people give me in Tirupati, lot of things. That doesn't interest me. What will I do with all that? Okay, shall I give you my work? Very good if you can do that. But what about your heart? That is for my family. Heart is for them. Work I will give you. Shall I give you my knowledge? Sure. We'll say, we'll give you our knowledge, but we still want to understand and analyze, and that's how our old format is. So the divine asks us only one thing. Only one thing. If we can do it, nothing else is required. We tell the divine, I want you completely to embody you, so that we may become one with you, not only in our soul but in our nature. He will say, all right, done. Only one condition, you give me yourself and I will change you and give you a new self. So the secret of the yoga lies in giving ourselves. If we don't give ourselves to the divine, we may sit for meditation for 1,000 years, we'll be a Ravana with gigantic ego. When we give ourselves to the divine for the joy of giving, why? Because we want to be one with him. Then we will see that slowly, for some time, he will see whether he really wants to give or not. But a time comes and he says, okay, you are mine. After that, the change starts. And that change may start with a little new aspiration, with a little bit of illumination in the mind, like the early morning sun, little love for the divine in the heart. But slowly it will grow until nothing is left of ourselves, of the old. When we look at ourselves, right now we think so proudly, oh, I am this and that. But when the change happens, when we look at ourselves, we'll say, oh, this stupid old fellow, this is what I was. And then we look at the divine and say, grateful thanks that you could change this donkey into this worthwhile human being. Okay, so self-giving is the path of yoga. that Sri Aurobindo and the mother have advocated. Let me put it like that. Not that we cannot approach in any other way. We can. It's up to us. Each one is free. Democratic country, democratic God, democratic spirituality. But shortest way, because new consciousness means the divine humanity or the divine superhumanity. Give your the old consciousness, and this is the oldest exchange formula. You give the old, and he will give us the new. Okay, in works, in our feelings, in thoughts. Practically it means think of the divine instead of thinking of all these useless things. आज market में क्या हुआ? Iran will fight or not fight. Iran is now in the background. What will happen to China? Let him take care. He'll take care. Don't worry. So there is someone who is going to take care. But instead, it doesn't mean we become indifferent. We take interest, but that's a different story in a different format. I'm not speaking of that. But right now, our first preoccupation of the thought should be divine. Our heart's emotion should rush towards the divine. In every human being with whom we relate, let us see in that human being an image of divinity. Everybody is worthy of that, because the divine presence is hidden inside. All our works, whatever we may be doing, smallest to so-called big works, everything has an offering to the divine. Even our very body's activities, breathing, heartbeat, sitting, going to bathroom, 100 things we do, sleep, actions from hands, walking up and down the stairs, taking a walk, everything should be done as if aspiring the divine to take hold of this body and this being. So this is the path of transformation that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have shown, by which we can arrive at the new consciousness. So why did we keep the name New Education for a New Consciousness? Well, because more and more souls have started this journey. Or they have waited for hundreds of years for this moment when the world is ready for this divinization. Up till now, souls have aspired for this, but matter was not ready. So when they entered, they felt very frustrated. They felt, oh, one more attempt, because they've already achieved that inner union. Now they come to help, but now more and more this earth atmosphere is becoming ready, and as the mother has said, that this new consciousness, the divine consciousness, Sri Aurobindo used the word supramental consciousness, that has been embedded. What is supramental consciousness? The consciousness with which the divine, one divine relates with this world. So something of that is embedded in nature, material nature. So the moment children are entering, they are breathing that, something of that divinity. By the very fact of taking a body. Imagine if you go to Kailash Dham, Shiva's abode. So Shiva's abode, what are you going to ask? So because your thoughts will be directed completely now by Shiva. You will be governed and controlled by Shiva and Mata Parvati because you are in that atmosphere. So similarly, because this new consciousness has been incorporated in matter, children who are going to come up, many of you I see sitting here, I think almost all, are going to embody this new consciousness. So they will spontaneously aspire for going beyond the human frame, human formula. They will constantly feel that there is something like a soul without knowing anything about it. I know this by experience. Some child's birthday, and the child after the end of the birthday says something very interesting. When the child confides after everybody is gone, 9-year-old child. So the child says, you know what, I have, everything was fine, all people around, but I need time to sit also. So why? So the child says very beautifully, you know what, people, not exact word, but people want this, that. But you know what, actually, they carry in themselves that little thing, and the child is showing with the hand, little thing, like little point, which is happiness. It is inside them. So then the child is asked, what do you mean by that little thing? That little thing, that's what we should find. That is inside us. And that gives happiness. And what is that little thing? The child says it is love. Now, actually, the child is speaking about psychic being. But the child doesn't know this term. But on the birthday, spontaneously the child feels that there is this core inside us. It's a very small little point, but it is this which gives meaning, this which gives happiness, this which gives love, and this is what we must find. And if we have it, nothing else is required. This is a profound wisdom. Great yogis, they are still wanting some powers. Here is a little child who says, I want this 9-year-old. So I am saying that this is a new kind of children. I see some of them come regularly even to the class. So, some whose birthdays is also approaching. So, they carry within themselves something new and beautiful. We as parents must encourage it rather than put them back into the old format. Don't do that. Let them evolve in this beautiful way. Let them understand there is something inside them that they carry. And if they find it, they don't need any other companion or anything else in life because they carry that eternal friend inside them. So, just if we can tell them this much, if they can understand this much, our job is done. Rest will be taken over by this divine presence within. So, these were the three questions which I found interesting. I think others have already taken up changing mindset of parents. I think, but it's important. Let's just change our mindset. Forget about parents and it's not changing mindset. It's opening the mind to infinity. Sets are sets. So we may replace one mindset with another mindset. By mindset means a fixed way of thinking. So we may replace one fixed way of thinking with another fixed way of thinking and create a belief system. But just open their minds to infinite possibilities. That's all that is required. The change has to be brought by the divine. Open their mind to the idea that there would be infinite things in store for man. The idea of progress beyond the framework of humanity. That's all that is required. And then rest will come. So, parents are not to be indoctrinated into this belief, that belief. But simply they must understand that whatever they think is the best, there is a greater best. And there is a better than the better best. There is a height beyond our human heights. And if they can understand this much, the job is done. Doesn't matter which way they perceive it. So this is what we need to do with parents. To cultivate peace and stillness in the mind is another question. Well, ask for it, as simple as that. All qualities, divine qualities. Peace, light, wideness, calm, joy, love. All waiting right outside the door. Knocking at our heart time to time. And what do we say? No, I have this work to do. Then peace says, okay, when can I enter your heart? Wait. I have to finish that work. After we finish that work, peace says, can I enter? No, I want to WhatsApp. So many things are there. So then again, peace says, may I come in? No, I am now too tired. I had a very tough day. So I want to sleep. So all these divine qualities want to come. They are conscious forces. We don't have to think of them like, we have to gather something mechanically, go to a store and get them. They are conscious forces, but because they are conscious forces, they would want us to at least call them, invite them. They don't want to come uninvited unless for some beings it can come who have already called them for a long time or there is a past life connection. But ordinarily, we need to call them. So call for peace. It will come. Initially, because it's a little bit, wants to wait. Peace means peace. So it will see whether you are ready. And one day, when we are not even asking for it, we will experience peace entering our system. Then value it. Value it means that when peace has come, don't resist the temptation to lose it. There are a number of people who have this experience of quietude, calm, tranquility for a few moments. Then next day their life goes on as usual. Just the usual run of life. Again, after a few months, they experience, say, it was very nice. I experienced it for a few moments. Then they say, I lost it. No, you didn't lose it. You didn't value it. You entered into, again, the same old life and its pattern. So that's why it is advisable that initially we should take out some time. And during those moments, we should just aspire for these things. And keep this time. This is my time with God. My time for calling peace. That time, 100 obstacles, 100 things. Parents, children, family members, this, phone, just shut everything. The world can wait outside. That is the mark of somebody who wants to lead a higher life. You see Yagnavalk leaving the entire kingdom and coming at the feet of the master. And then nothing matters. The whole kingdom, nothing matters. That should be our state when we sit for meditation. Like a blank slate. Whatever the divine gives, I will receive it. But at the same time, we are so much inwardly focused that this is my time with God. And He is the most important person in my life. And then the other things will slowly take their own place. Don't worry about them. So, peace, stillness, everything will come if we aspire for them. And we don't need to go anywhere to do it because we are carrying the divine presence inside, around us. We can sit anywhere and call for peace. Later on, when we develop a rapport, like a friend, then what do? Then supposing we are going and suddenly there is some big peace, 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 and peace will come. Yes, I'm there. What do you need? Just be with me. And you'll see that your heart is filled with the tranquility. Agitated thoughts have suddenly been pacified. Why? Because we have made friends with peace. So make friends with these divine forces. Ancient times, for each of these forces, there was a name. It was a god. But the problem was that we gave a fixed form to the gods and turned a religion. Shantakaram, Bhujang Shayanam. Now what happens? The moment you say Bhujang Shayanam, so you imagine a serpent over which Lord Vishnu is sleeping. So you have fixed the form. But when you don't know this and you say peace, same, Lord Vishnu in his mighty wideness will come. Or Shiva with his peaceful beneficence will come. But he will not come the way our human mind is conceiving. Shiva must come with a snake around his neck. No. He's peace. When peace comes, Shiva comes. When peace comes, divine comes. So, because the human mind has fixed the forms, therefore these Godheads have receded into silence. So now is a new age. In this new age, we will not call them as gods, but we will call them as conscious forces and beings. Love, peace, strength, everything, knowledge, they're all conscious forces which will enter into us and change our life into a life divine. So this about peace and stillness. Let me see. Concentration, practice, 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 practice. Concentration, practice in everything. Do a job, do it with concentration. You're putting arranging some objects, do it with concentration. Cooking something, do it with concentration. Chopping vegetables, do it with concentration. Eating, do it with concentration. Till one day, concentration becomes so developed that wherever, this faculty has to be developed. Wherever you divert it, it will come. So develop this ability of concentration by practice. If it's not developing in 1 month, practice 2 months. It hasn't come in 2 months, practice 3 months. Haven't come in 1 year, practice 2 years. Do it till one day you say that just by mere concentration one can open all obstacles, because concentration is a power like that. So concentration comes with practice. And framework I have already discussed. I think that's about it. Yeah, the school and democratic education is vital for a new society balanced in peace, harmony, respect for all being. Parents have to be involved at school. Yes, everybody, parents, teacher. But let me say one thing. While the mind wants all these things, mind cannot get them. We have to go beyond the framework of the mind. We have to go deeper than our surface personality. We can't find these things within the framework in which we operate. It is like supposing you go to a shop where imitation jewelry is sold. You tell him that I want diamond. He will say, yes, sir, I'll give you. You ask him the price. He will say, sir, 500 रुपया आपका लिए हम 200 रुपया में दे देंगे. You buy it. Don't you believe that I'm just being fooled? Even going to a real jewelry shop and buying diamond is difficult to understand. So we must understand within the mind, we seek, but we don't find. That's why seeking is given to every species. Seeking is given so that we can go beyond the framework and find it. That's why every species, seeking is the path of evolution. Seeking is not conscious in animals, but that giraffe, because the neck was being strained, it grew into something tall. So when we seek, the mind seeks. You will not find it within the mind. One day a door will open and we'll find it. So, but when we seek and try mental ways, it won't work out. So, there are two doors we have to open in children, but before we do it in children and parents, we have to do it in ourselves. One door which opens inward, it is the door to the psychic being. And one door which opens upwards, upwards to the spiritual consciousness. What is the difference? Psychic being is something which comes within the frame of time and space. It is our individual divinity. So it is the individual mode of expression of the divine within us. It is unique to each one, the true individuality. And the spiritual consciousness takes us beyond time and space. It is cosmic by its nature. It establishes the base for the entire cosmos. Whereas the psychic being, it establishes that nodal point through which the divine can pour his forces into us. So this is the basic difference. And these two doors must be opened. They can open through concentration, inner concentration, upward concentration. But they can open when we are in contact with living embodiments of such beings. That's why the value of satsang. So when we have satsang, teachers, parents, even children, some kind of satsang, some kind of concentration, then a time comes when in some people, I don't say that in everybody it will straight away open, but even in those it doesn't open, it has yet set the road, set you on the right road. Eventually it will open. I am saying that whether in a particular life or not. But because one has traveled, this psychic education, whatever effort has gone, one comes back with it. It is not lost. It is deposited in divine development banks, which never goes crash. Okay, so turn within, turn upward, and take help from the grace. And a day will come when this inner door and the higher door will open. Then life begins. Okay? Then joy begins. Then love begins. Then we begin to live. Then when we look back at this, we think, oh my God, we were living like dead people. We thought we are alive. We thought this is happiness. This is happiness. This is filth. We thought this is love. This is love? My God. This is not love, because you start tasting the real things. So seek those things within, upward, and one will find those things. I think I have covered all the questions which were given. If there is anything else, please let me know. It is such a joy to see all of you sitting with such lovely rapt attention, and so fortunate in this world where people are rushing and running into all kinds of things, that I see most of us young faces, that we are sitting here in this temple of the Divine Mother and aspiring for higher things. So my gratitude to give me this opportunity to interact with all of you. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Alokji, thank you. Will you be taking some questions, live questions? Would that be okay? Alokji, thank you very much. Would it be okay if you can take, if somebody has questions?
Yes,
live
yes, of course.
So first, I have a question myself.
Yes, please.
So what would be the ideal teacher to student ratio or student to teacher ratio in a school where where we can actually create such environment where children can actually get that aspirations and so on, like what you have spoken about. Yeah. And let's say if in a school we have a very high effective student to effective effective teacher ratio. I mean, if the students are too many and teachers are less, how can we implement or bring about such environment that you are talking about?
Okay, so very beautiful question, very practical. So the first aspect of the question is, what is the ideal student-teacher ratio? Well, when children are not yet formed entities, when they are still like a little, mass, if I may use the word, then we can have 10 to 15, maximum 20 students to one teacher, because they are still, not very well formed. The moment you exceed that number 20, I mean, studies show that when you exceed the number 30, but I mean, for integral education, when you start exceeding the number 20, then, there is dispersal of consciousness, because it's like a mass consciousness. So, few students who are of a different kind and the whole class is into that mode. But for children, say kindergarten and even up to maybe 10, 12 years of age, before they enter adolescence, I mean, the ratio can be 15 to 20. But as they go up, they enter adolescence, then we need not just we need also mentoring, because they are entering into a very turbulent phase. And that's when the ratio should start coming down. Maybe when they enter adolescence, maybe 5 to 10 per teacher. And when they enter into higher classes, what can be called as adult education, then ideal is 1 to 1, but if not, maybe 3 to 1. So, but this is the ideal. As I said, it may not be practicable. It is not. The fact is that, it never really happens. So what is to be done? Well, there is a very ancient, well-known truth that in any group, there will be few who are like the hub of something new and beautiful. And there are others who will be like a routine. They are coming, teaching, even when you have the ratio, still all teachers will not, understand. Even supposing you have a 15 student to 1 teacher ratio, still all teachers may not be open to something greater, something more beautiful, truer. So those who are more open, the few in number, the few have to take the greater burden. So this greater burden is a joy. It is also true in any group life. Mother spoke about it even in the ashram context. She said that there are few persons who are actually doing the yoga. There are many who are there. Now, what do these few persons who really do the yoga, if we may use the word, yoga is done in us, but let's say, they become representatives who take upon themselves the burden of the rest. Now, this goes on till the others also begin to become part of this core. So, at least there should be in any school at least one person, preferably 3, 5, as a core, who move around, interact. They should not be just in one class, they should be interacting with many students. And one of the ways to do it is, Mother has given a wonderful process, which unfortunately we don't now practice. But see what she was doing. Today only I was discussing this, that you may have everything in the school, but what about life? Is there a subject called life? They are living. They don't know about life. We have history, geography, science, physics, mathematics, biology, literature, art, humanities, life. How do they understand life? There is no subject like that. Why? Because it doesn't fetch marks. So where do you give life education? Evenings. One of the remarkable things about the mother, when she started the center of education, she started the evening classes. And this went on till almost 9 years. And the reason why she stopped at a point of time, because she said nobody is interested. But there should be one person or two persons who can take this kind of evening class for the larger groups, where things like life, but such a person should be like a, really a representative who is engaged in deep into yoga on the path. Then such a person taking this kind of evening interactions with children will take care of the deficiencies which will be there during the regular school times. So I can see that some of the people are there who can possibly do this kind of thing, and they will take more burden, there is no doubt about it. So this is the only way one can possibly take care of this. It's not an easy task, but it is doable. And the more we move on the path, the more it begins to become easier and easier. I mean, the ideal school is not something which is transplanted and done in a day. It is like all things, an evolving process. So if the right aspiration is there, you will see that more and more teachers will begin to join. At first, let us say if there are 20 teachers and 2 understand this, slowly you will see that 4 or 5 teachers understand this. So there should be regular swadhyaya with teachers, that they should sit together and try to understand this new education, so that even with 30 to 1 teacher, when they go, they do something solid. So this regular interaction of teachers between themselves interaction with parents so that this new thought can come. Even a visit to a place like Pondicherry, where they can interact and meet with people, or these kind of virtual platforms, they are very helpful. Then one day, out of 20, you will see that there are 4 or 5 who are really interested. That's how the group dynamics work, and it expands to include more and more people. Yes.
Thank you so much. I have a follow-up question, one more, and then
Yes,
we will move on to the other questions if somebody has.
Yes.
The other question is, how do we deal with quote unquote difficult, quote unquote, difficult students? Like,
Yeah.
for example, in the context of our ashram here, we have students coming from various different backgrounds. So some of them, they do not have proper family environment where they grow in a normal sense, in a normal way. So when they come here, they have to follow certain disciplinary rules and so on, and they have to change themselves in a certain way. So how do we efficiently, as teachers, deal with such students who need greater or much more guidance from teachers
Yes.
like us or others, when we are not able to give them that, when we
Yes.
don't have enough time,
Yes.
because we have other responsibilities as well? How do we minimize minimize the time and so on?
So, dealing with students who are, as you rightly said, quote unquote difficult, I would put it like this, that more than the background and all, students come from different levels. And it is not always a good idea to mix all the levels. See, that's why the mother spoke of the free progress system. So, when we mix the levels, it will create confusion. It will be either at the expense of those who, for no fault of theirs, have to be come back, and maybe this will also not help the difficult student. So generally, it is better that if you have a few difficult students, they will need a special kind of classes in a special format, something like a free progress. Now, I'm not sure whether a school in the ashram in Nepal can really provide this kind of thing, in which case one has to make some kind of selection at some point. But surely, if one wants to undertake this challenge, then it cannot be done with the regular student setup. I mean, cannot be done in the sense one can always put in and do it as an experiment, but it is likely to completely spoil the group dynamics. It's much better that because we feel compassion, we want, certain students to make 2 sections. One where children are ready for a more direct and deeper education, and the other way where even the basics are needed, like as you said, more disciplining. So that is one way. Like in Mothers International School, there is the regular school and there is Mirambika. Similarly, in many places they have this kind of a facility. Now, every facility will be there, but the difference will be in the way a teacher deals with the student, because you can't deal the same way. If there is a very, let's say, a restless student and he is in the class with other student, he will end up making the whole class restless. So such a student who is very restless may need a lot more physical education, because he has to learn to train his energies. He may not be really ready for a typical mental education. He may need a lot more physical exercises, other forms of exercises. So we have to understand this. This knowledge was there in ancient times, what is called as adhikar bhed. But now we have lost it, because as rightly it is said, democratic, yeah, it is true. But now it can be done in very nice ways. That there are places, I'm not suggesting special schools, but in the same school setup, there should be sections where these children can be trained in a slightly different way. As I said, many of them will need a lot of physical education, which is one of the direct means of instilling discipline. Interesting games. And if they have to be together in the setup, then give a lot of time for physical education in the evening. But unfortunately, then there will be an imbalance. But most simplest way to deal with these restless energies, which comes from the prana, which is absolutely unbridled, unregulated, is through physical education. So increase it in the school, especially for children who are not ready for deeper and higher education. Of course, physical education should be for everyone, but for these children, it can be given in a very special methodical way.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, can we go on to question session from others?
Yes, we can take one question perhaps. I saw someone raising the hand, and yes, please go ahead.
Namaste, this is me, Sandesh,
Yes.
and I would like to ask you a question. In spite of having a lot of friends and brothers, sister around us, sometimes we feel loneliness. What is
Yes.
the reason behind this?
Yes. Wonderful. So, very good question. Though it's a little jara hatke, but it's a very. When people feel lonely, in spite of having everybody, I must tell you it's a special grace. Don't lose this opportunity. When we feel lonely, that means the divine is preparing us to meet Him. There are people who are always busy with either friends, family, this, that, and they think it's a blessing. Let me tell you, it is the biggest web in which they are caught. There is a very beautiful line in Savitri: the soul that can live alone with itself meets God. So if you are lonely, and trust me, that no companion, whomever you may have, hundreds of people, can satisfy this need for the eternal companion which human beings carry. So while it's all right, friends are there, everybody is there, and whole world is there, but seek that companion within us. And if you have begun to feel lonely, then means it's a sign that that companion is calling you, saying, "Look here, I am also here." So take it as an opportunity and discover that eternal companion who is not only in this life but in lives to follow, who is not only during life but death, another life. What I am trying to say is, when you feel alone and lonely, make God your friend, best friend ever. Because He will be always with us, but He's a little shy natured. So you have to, kind of tell Him, we really want you, we love you. After a time, He says, "Okay, fine, I'll be your friend." So He is counselor, He's a mentor, He's a playmate. We have put God into a pedestal where we go, do worship, put malas. That's old time spirituality. Make Him your friend. Doesn't matter whichever way, Shiva, Krishna, Mother Sri Aurobindo, they would love to become friends. So make them your friend, eternal friend, and all this loneliness will just vanish. In fact, then you would want to be lonely. You know why? Because He's your best friend. You are missing Him. You know what happens when you have a best friend? You are looking for opportunities when you can meet your friend, because you are so surrounded by things. So when you have God as your friend, then you will seek to be alone and be with Him. And that is something, the greatest of friendship and companionship that one can ever experience. All right? So I think we will, shall we close here? Because I have another program now. And we will meet, of course, anytime. It's like a family. Ramchandra ji, we can meet always on the Zoom platform, is very easy. Or link is very easy. Yes?
Yes, we will organize in future also, but we will see and let you know.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have to move right now, or do you have like 5 minutes? Manoji, thank you very much. We'll see again. I know you are you have another session going on.